Department of Economic Development, and I want to welcome you on behalf of Mitch McDonald, who is the Group Editorial Director of DC Velocity and the Supply Chain Quarterly. He's going to be our moderator today. But before we start, I ask you all to silence your mobile devices. And if you would, it looks like we've got plenty of seats, so you don't really need to push toward the center. All right. Also would encourage you to open your books and read everybody's profile. Thank you. Mitch.
Thank you. And please read my profile. My mother spent a lot of time on it. Let me also welcome you and thank you for joining us this morning. Between all the activity here in the glorious Georgia World Congress Center this week, it's been very busy, and I know you have a lot of selections where you can go for some content. We are going to do our level best to make this worthwhile. I believe this promises to be quite an interesting and engaging discussion of export issues because among our panelists, you're going to hear thoughts, comments, and views from four very different perspectives. Our speakers are going to be discussing their operations, the challenges they face, the solutions in the areas of exports, but not purely necessarily from a Georgian perspective, but also from a national and global perspective as well, obviously almost by default. When we say export, we know we're not talking intra-state necessarily. The way we'll proceed today, lucky for you, I am going to be very brief. I'll introduce each speaker individually as they're about to come to the floor. Each speaker will speak for roughly 15 minutes, and at the end, if all goes as scheduled, we should have a good, healthy minimum of at least 15 minutes for a lively Q&A. There are microphones in the audience between each aisle. Do urge you to consider questions, jot them down as they come to mind, and we'll have the full Q&A at the end. Okay, so here we go. Our first speaker is Steve Lash, who's the Senior Director of Distribution and Logistics at Church's Chicken. Steve's a graduate of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville with a BS in Logistics and Transportation. Church's Chicken, of course, is a highly recognized brand name in the quick service restaurant sector and is one of the largest quick service chicken concepts in the world with more than 1,700 locations in 25 countries, and some of them are in very surprising locations, at least to me. Steve will be sharing with us an overview of the challenges that relate to management of a global supply chain for QSR brand. Steve?
Good morning. First, some very good news. My wife has absolutely demanded I not do any chicken jokes. No chicken jokes. As mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges of a global QSR. QSR, for those of you that do not, is quick service restaurant. McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy, Harvey's, Church's quick service restaurant. Talk a little bit about Church's, who we are, where we're at globally. Talk a little bit about what I think is so very key to us in logistics, about keeping things simple. Boxes in, boxes out. Those of you that deal with bulk, it's a little bit different, but boxes in, boxes out. And then finally, some observations about this vocation that we have chosen and have worked in. Church's, it's an all-American brand. It started in the 1950s in San Antonio, Texas, just across the street from the Alamo by a gentleman by the name of George Church. And George, American entrepreneur, he had a simple little walk-up. You know, as you grow up, you might have seen these little fruit stands, maybe by 8 by 8, 8 by 4, box. That's what he started out in. Served only chicken. And as mentioned in the lower right-hand part of the screen, his first side item was jalapenos, okay? That tells you how simple the operation was. We'll come back to jalapenos in a second. We're about serving families. Taco Bell, God bless them, they have a specific target market. You're 18, you're 22, you're young, you're hungry, you want fuel, okay? That's what they're about. We're about the family. We want to help the provider of that family bring home a great meal to their family members that they can enjoy. So we are, for the provider and their families and their communities. Support the individual, support the community, support the families in the community. We like and want to help them bring home to their families wonderful, authentic, Southern-style food at a very reasonable cost. So, as mentioned, we're the 4th largest in the world. You can figure out real quick who the other guys are. Guys up in Louisville, KFC. The other 3, right in our backyard, Popeyes, and of course the folks up the road from them at Chick-fil-A, and us. We round out the top 4. We were acquired, as are a lot of restaurant QSRs, by a private investment group, Friedman, Fisher & Lowe, 2009. We have 2 brands globally, and I'll come back to that in the jalapeno in just a second. Internationally, we're a franchise operation. It's owned by individual entrepreneurs. Here in the U.S., we have about 270 company stores. Global sales, 2013, a little over $1.3 billion. We'll do a little bit better than that this year. And we're headquartered here in wonderful Atlanta, Georgia. Globally, a little bit of a picture of where we're at. Store counts by area. Not too sure about the store counts in Russia and in the Ukraine. I think there's some changes going on over there. So legal and real estate are going to have to figure out, what country is this in now, and who has the franchisee rights for what used to be the Crimea. So we'll figure that out. Brand highlights, we have, as mentioned, about 265 units here in the United States, strong presence in Latin America, about 265 there. We're also in the Middle East and also Asia Pacific. We're going to be opening in New Zealand in the fall. And for those of you that operate internationally, there's sometimes a fight internally on who gets to be on the opening team in special countries, okay? Certain parts of the world, it's kind of a romantic thing, international business travel. And you get there, and you do it, and it's really tiring. We're all worn out, come back, and do that a couple, 3 times. And then about the 2nd or 3rd time that you're in your startup meeting, I went on the last one. It's your turn. You go open that one up on the far side of the world. Well, we got one coming up down in New Zealand for those of you who will be down there later this year. So look forward to you visiting us there then. A little bit more about the challenges of global supply chain. When we show up, we pretty much bring the whole kit bag with the exception of what we have to get locally. We come with a team that helps on development, the image and design, operations. Will come in, train the locals on how you deliver this brand, because you want to have your brand delivered the same as much as possible globally. IT, bringing in the back of the house systems, that sort of thing. Marketing, that's key. You got to know your customer. What do they like? What do they don't like? What you can do when you can do it. Quality assurance, that's a tough job internationally. Come back to that a little bit later on things you can and cannot do in certain areas. And then supply chain, equipment, food and packaging, uniforms, audits of the stores to make sure things are the way they are and should be, so you can ensure that you're delivering that brand the way it should be. So, quick look around the world. Some different looks of our restaurants. Every place is a little bit different. That one in the lower right, Syria. In the U.S., if you go by one of our locations, you'll see that top logo. Around the world, it won't say churches in the middle. It will say Texas chicken. Why? Remember that jalapeno I talked about a little while ago? If you went globally and asked a consumer, churches, what do you think it is? They might not know. But if you tell them Texas, something clicks, okay? And if you go beyond that and they see it's a Texas-based restaurant, some things start to fall into place, so they have expectations about what the food they will be served, and you get a little more consumer identification, and that's where that jalapeno becomes important. Boxes in, boxes out. This is what a lot of us do as a vocation. It has to be something that is at the same time simple, repetitive, but you can build it into something immensely complex. Back in, I believe it was the late 70s or early 80s, there was a movie called The Karate Kid. And if you remember, the master was teaching the kid, the novice who was coming up, an exercise. Polish on, polish off. Box in, box out. Do that 10.5 million times a year, and you get proficient at it, you get good at it, and that's what I think our vocation is about, is taking things that should be simple, building them on top of one another, and then you can add in various levels of complexity when you try to do it globally. So, we're not alone on this. We don't make a lot of the things that we serve in our restaurants. We take a lot of things from a lot of people and combine them together. Automotive industry, famous for that. Workers come in one door, parts come in another door, automobiles go off the assembly line. So it's not like they're in the back room making all those automobiles by hand. We look to our suppliers for food, packaging, cleaning supplies, a number of the things that you won't see behind the counter, restaurants, equipment, uniforms, electronic equipment, things like that. So, boxes in, boxes out, how do we do it? Domestically, we have 13 distribution centers around the U.S. We have one distribution center that is exclusively for exportation, and then we have two multi-purposes that can do either to Asia, or the other one is to pack rim. And then we do a lot of things on an international basis, what we call DSD, direct store delivery. I'm sure if you're in an international endeavor, you know that all too well. Sometimes you just can't get it internationally for one reason or another, and I'll bring that up in just a second. So, some things about global supply that we find helpful as guidelines. Call them the 5 W's. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, many. Essence of any good business or organizational plan. If you can identify those 5, you know what you want to do, when you want to do it, where you want to do it, how you want to do it, and who you want to do it to. So that's sort of a guide that we use. And in pursuit of that, here are the 3 letters that you don't want to see on your child's report card, but are important to us on global supply. 3 C's and 3 F's. Control, communicate, collaborate. Control. You have to control your brand internationally for us. Otherwise, it sort of wanders off, morphs into something other than what the core brand is, and that gets back to that expectation of the customer of, I got it here, it should be the same thing, roughly, in another country. So you have to control your brand. Communicate. Oh, boy. We were talking before the panel began about how key communication is and how it has changed down through the years. Being able to communicate not just with your staff, but with your suppliers, your units, all those elements of the supply chain. And then finally, collaborate. You know, we don't have all the great ideas all by ourselves. We all know that. So suppliers, franchisees, various elements of the community give us insight on how to do things, so collaboration works very well for us in international supply. The 3 F's, real simple. Follow up, follow up, follow up. If you've ever been to Lake Tahoe, that area is shaped a little bit like a clock. And on the south end of the lake, at 6 o'clock, it divides into Nevada and California. Literally on one side of the street is South Lake Tahoe, California. The other side of the street is State Line, Nevada. And it is different as night and day. One side of the street is a nice family environment. The other side is casinos and a lot of other things. So one of the bumper stickers I saw out there that has application to what we're talking about and what you can and cannot do internationally, particularly in the area of food, but I'm sure every industry has its own special things, is I don't care how they did it in California. This is Nevada. This is my home. This is the way we're going to do it here. And you run into a lot of that in international supply in the restaurant business. So some things to think about, that due diligence. Restriction on food imports. You can't bring that in here. Okay, got to go find something local. Import duties and tariffs. Okay, we're going to let you bring it in, but it's going to cost 20% more than if you got it locally. Currency swings. Okay, got to take that into account. What if the currency swings up 10%, down percent? What does that do to your in-restaurant food costs? Current commodity swings. Everybody remember what happened back in 2012 when the U.S. had probably its biggest agricultural disaster in history, really. It was a terrific impact on commodity costs. Local import quotas. If you need 1,000 of something a year, make sure that your quota allows you to bring in 1,000, or you may find yourself buying one local or requesting exemption. Local religious considerations, always important when you go internationally, particularly when you're dealing with foodstuffs. Always have to be cognizant of that. And then what are the key religious holidays in terms of when are your sales going to fall off the edge of the table, and conversely, when are they going to go through the roof? Local specifications. Electricity, what's the wattage, the voltage? Water, what's the PSI? All your restaurant equipment, what is it set up to handle? Got to think about all those things, at least we have to. Terms of purchase, the simple ins and outs of that buy-sell relation. Documentation, what are the languages going to be on the docs? All those things that you're familiar with, domestically or internationally, it's all in the paperwork. And the final thing I put is pallets. I mean, a pallet's a real simple thing, right? Normally. But when you get international, they will restrict the size, the type, what it's made out of, and what you have to do to it before they'll let you bring it into your country. More things to think about. So, getting close to the end of my time, 3 maximums I have for inventory management in global food supply. Don't run out, and don't have obsolete inventory. As a customer, as a guest, you have the expectation it's going to fresh, it's going to taste great. Don't want to have that one where it's been there for 6 months, and now you're trying to make something out of it and deliver the brand. No, can't do that. So, some final notes. It's never done until the paperwork is done. As we know in our business and logistics, it's all about the paperwork, or the electrons maybe, how much is on paper anymore. Trust, but validate. Trust that everything will go as you planned, but always come back and validate. And that carpenter's sage advice, measure twice, cut once. You only get to cut the piece of wood once. You only get one shot at a new store opening on the far side of the world. Make it count, make it right. And then finally, all this fun, and they pay us to do it. We get entrusted with resources, capital, we're empowered with something. We want you to go take our brand, and we want to open up a unit on the far side of the planet. And that's a challenge. So if it sounded like I stressed a lot on planning, on follow-up, and all those detail things, just remember the next time you're 6,000 miles from here in another country, and you go up to any U.S.-type restaurant, and you get served whatever you ordered, try to think about all that went in to bring that to where it is. So, I hope you drop by and see us shortly. I enjoyed your time and patience. We're going to have QA in a little bit. I'm down to 13 seconds. I've got this.
Stretch.
Stretch? I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very, very intriguing stuff. You mentioned an awful lot of things that you have to be mindful of with a quick service circumstance going globally. If you had to narrow down one, would you tell someone is the most important thing you need to be mindful, and especially in terms of securing and ensuring supply worldwide?
As you probably picked up in my remarks, in one word, planning.
Fair enough. Our next speaker this morning is Gary Simpson, Global Sourcing Manager as well as Import-Export Compliance Manager for GIW Industries, a producer of wear-resistant parts for severe duty applications including minerals mining, oil sands, dredging, and flue gas. I practiced this.
I can't say it either.
Flue gas desulfurization. Everybody. GIW's facilities include 2 manufacturing plants, engineering, R&D, sales, and customer support, a world-class hydraulics laboratory, and service centers throughout North America. This morning, he's going to discuss the evolving logistics network at GIW and its export compliance program.
Where are we here?
There we are.
start. There we go. Okay. First of all, it's a great pleasure for me to be here. Paige called me about a week ago and said, "Can you help me? I got a guy that can't come." So I said, "Do you want our CEO to come?" And he said, "No." I went, "Oh, okay." My passion here is the pump business. If you've never heard of us, it's because you probably don't mine anything, you don't do anything in the oil sands in Canada, and you don't have a gold or diamond mine in South America or South Africa or Australia. If you take a look at the symbols, I had to ask what these were the other day. The round one means pump, and the bow tie means valve. KSB, our parent company, has a very big valve business, and we have a very large pump business. Like I said, we're in the oil sands. We build pumps for dredge ships. If you've never been inside the bottom of a dredge ship, it's a real tourist attraction. If you're more than 5 foot 7 inches tall, please remember to duck. That's what hard hats are for. My traveling compartner has been a GIW employee for 43 years, and every time we went through a bulkhead, I bumped my head and he laughed at me. Oil sands is probably 65% of our business. We do the desulfurization pumps as a small sideline because our customers need to have that done. KSB, our parent company, does smaller size pumps in the mining business as well as food service and some other things, mostly in Europe. Our North American reach, we have 5 service centers, including our main plant in Grovetown, Thompson, Georgia, which is 22.5 miles away. Our large service center in the oil sands in Edmonton, Alberta, and in Fort McMurray. Northern Mining Services in Hibbing, Minnesota. If you've ever been up there, it's cold. The temperature yesterday in Fort McMurray was a balmy 14 degrees below zero. Thankfully, they don't have us go up there very often. Our global research, our global presence, we're virtually everywhere that anybody mines anything. We have service centers through KSB and through our own service centers all around the world. Malaysia, Australia, the west coast of South America, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, some places in Brazil. Like I said before, our main thrust is in the oil sands in northwest Canada. 300,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Grovetown. All this is really interesting. It's 25-ton furnaces. They're all electrical induction, so energy and things like that's important to us. When we move these things from one country to another, we're not moving a box, we're moving a pump. These things are 35 to 40,000 pounds apiece. They don't go down the road very friendly. They overhang the trailer, so we have escorts, and it's a difficult project around the world. Most of our customers require things to be machinery crated, so the box ends up being big enough to live in when they take the stuff out of it. We have our own heat treating facility, as you can well imagine. We heat treat to make our metal more resistant to wear. It's a formula just like Coca-Cola. We don't tell anybody how to do it, but we expect you to be able to do it to the hardness that we need if we get you to do it around the world for us. Right now, the products that we make, I blame the Caterpillar Corporation because as soon as they build a bigger mining truck, the mining companies want to build a bigger pump so they can move whatever dumps out of the truck in one movement. People don't understand when you have a slurry pump, anything that you mix with water gets pumped through a pump. So rocks as big as my head get pumped through a pump. And if you haven't heard one or seen one, it's an amazing feat. We have our own machine shop. We turn and we create some of the hardest metal on this planet. Our Burnell scale, if you're familiar with that, is over 600. Most of our white iron products are up to 900 Burnell. It's all specialized cutter. We work with a cutting company, a tool manufacturer that makes ceramic cutters just for us. We increase the size of the machines every time we increase the size of the pump. Give you an idea how big some of this stuff is. That's a medium-sized slurry pump. It's made out of white iron. Machine surfaces are there so that they fit up to the piping and the impellers, and tolerances on something big like this are hundreds of thousandths of an inch. People don't understand that just because it's pumping something really big through it, the tolerances are just the same as if you were pumping water or beer. So tolerances, even though it's huge, we expect the same tolerance when we make things. Get an idea how difficult this stuff is to move. On the cable, on the machine that's moving it, that's just the bearing housing and the shaft. There's a driver, usually a 50 or 60,000 horsepower electric motor, and that hooks to the wet end part, or that shell that's in the front has a big impeller that sits in it that weighs about 20,000 pounds, and that's why the horsepower is so high, so you can move that sort of thing. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking to you today because everybody in this room is in here because you're the same thing that I am. You are, whether you let your broker do it or not, you are an exporter of record. To the United States government, you are the guy that's doing this to the government. You're exporting things, and there are rules and regulations. So these government agencies are the people that you have to make happy. They're not all listed up here, but these are the major players. Not knowing what the rules are is not a defense. When U.S. Customs or the State Department or any of the other government agencies come to see you, you can't say, I didn't know, because you have reason to know, and not knowing is not a defense. They have a term in the government called informed compliance. That means the information is out there, you go get it and learn it. It's not our responsibility as the government of the United States to teach it to you. If you want to export, exporting is a privilege. It's not a guarantee by the Constitution, and do it wrong, and someday somebody will come to tell you that your privileges have been revoked. If you're a company like ours, where 65% of your revenue comes from sales outside of the U.S., 65% of your employees no longer need to come to work the next day. That's how important these export regulations can be. We don't make any controlled, highly technical products. I don't have anything in my arsenal that's weapons or weapon systems. I make pumps. I'm held to the same standard as everybody else is. You got to follow the rules. These big things, you can get an idea how big these things are. When we ship things out of the country, we move things from Grovetown, Georgia. Everybody know where Grovetown is? Yeah, you people know where it is because you live there. Grovetown, you probably know where it is. You know where Augusta is? You know what's an important event coming up in Augusta? I am 10 miles on the west side, exit 190, Interstate 20. That's Grovetown, Georgia. The company's been in business for 125 years. This is the first time in 125 years that we've ever had an export compliance officer. Believe me when I tell you, your brokers are great folks. Your freight forwarders are absolutely your best friends. They're not accountable for what you do. You are. When you pick a harmonized tariff code to report your stuff to the government, never, ever, ever let anybody else pick them but somebody in your company. Because I had freight forwarders when I worked at another company who told me that I didn't understand that they could pick other numbers because they're freight forwarders. That is a load because there is no such thing. Those numbers are the same for everybody. And there's a number for everything, from apples to zoo animals, water, chemistry, medical equipment, games and stuff that your kids play on TV. Those are all very, very important understandings for exporters of record. And oh, by the way, if you buy things, like we all hear from a logistics network, we import things. Guess what? If you import things, you're an importer of record. And if you think the export regulations are difficult, how many people know who their export compliance officer is in their company? Do you export things? Find out. Ask questions. When the government comes to see you, they expect you to have a reasonable person that knows the regulations. I've been through 7 government audits. I was around when they wrote the new rules for NAFTA. I can tell you, if you're not participating in free trade programs, you got to take a look at them. One of the companies I worked for saved $40 million a year in duties we didn't spend after NAFTA was put in place. $40 million. The problem with that is they don't spend it, so they don't count it. So your boss, if he's smart, he tells the people who are bean counters in your company, hey, I saved you $40 million. The bowling team needs new socks. Don't tell me I can't have them. I'm not kidding you when I tell you free trade programs are there to enhance trading with the United States and the other countries these trade deals are. Very, very important to take advantage of them. Foreign trade zones, if your company has use for those, they're worth looking into. Ask questions. Duty drawback, when you buy things from a domestic supplier, if he brought them in from another country and he paid duty on them, if you put his products in your product and you ship your product out of the country, guess what? You can get the duty money back. He can't. But you have to have an intermediary, you have to have a service provider that's willing to do that for you. At Little Old Club Car in Augusta, Georgia, I brought back into the company $300,000 a year in duty drawback because people we bought things from in the domestic U.S. paid duty, and I exported their products. Did I split the money with them? Sure I did. I wanted their import data. There's money left on the table every year that exporting companies don't take advantage of because they don't have infrastructure or they don't even know that you can get the duty back because you exported the product. Ask questions. It's well worth your while. You're going to see this, and I got this from my marketing folks, so I know it's okay to tell you. KSB, because we've invested $40 million in Grovetown, Georgia. That program started about a month ago. KSB has decided that we are now going to be called GIW Minerals. So you're going to see that instead of GIW Industries probably in June or July timeframe. It's something that the company is very proud of. We're going to hire some more people. We're going to expand our operations. We're going to be able to build bigger pumps in Grovetown, Georgia. Part of the problem is when you build a bigger pump, right now on the drawing board we have a pump that's 17 feet across. They want to bring it in from, we're going to make it in Europe. We're going to bring it to Grovetown, Georgia to test it. The import regulations for getting that thing from the port across the road to Grovetown, Georgia is $6,000. Escorted, police escorted. It's 17 feet wide. There's no other way to do it. Travel during the day. We hold up. When you're on your vacation, there's a big truck in front of you. It'll probably be me. A little bit about the expansion. If you were in a plane, you could look down at our Grovetown facility. This is what you'd see today. Where the Phase 1 sign is, we've moved 850,000 cubic yards of dirt. We're in the very beginning phases of this. We're going to add 40,000 square feet to our foundry. We're going to add another 60,000 square feet of furnace operations in Phase 2. And the 3, 4, and 5 will come at a later date. Additional heat treating, cleaning, machine shop. And we're finally going to build a real distribution center. Right now, the distribution of our stuff, if you look at a foundry, at the far end's the dirty end, at the closest part by the road is the clean end. And that's our shipping department, the clean end. It's very, very difficult when you run out of space. So we finally decided that in order to serve our customers better and do a little bit better job and less handling of product, we needed a distribution center. So that'll happen probably at the beginning of January. And it's a great thing to see when you have large products and difficult to move products. The less times you can handle something like that, the less chance you have of damaging it. The funny thing is we paint everything a really nice bright blue color. The paint's $230 a gallon, and as soon as the pump gets put in service, about 5 minutes later, you can't even tell it was painted. So I don't know if it's a waste of money or not, but the customers really love to see that blue paint. Just a little bit about us. Thank you guys for your time. And like I said, this is an interesting thing. If you're an exporter, you got to know this stuff.
I became a Mac user about 8 years ago. Believe it or not, you forget everything. I don't even want to touch this PowerPoint. We'll let the next speaker take care of that. Gary, thank you very much. Our third speaker today is Doug Tingle, Vice Chairman and co-founder of 1888 Mills, a global manufacturer of home and commercial textiles, catering to the retail, hospitality, and healthcare markets worldwide. Doug is very proud, I think as he should be, to point out that 1888 Mills operates the largest remaining towel mill in the entire United States. It's considered a pioneer in global towel manufacturing. 1888 Mills operates facilities in addition to the U.S., also in Bangladesh and in Pakistan. He's with us today to discuss what he describes as the key factors and strategies enabling Georgia manufacturing to become more competitive on the global scale. Doug?
I'm going to get an assist from Steve on getting my slides up for me.
You realize this means you're going to have to come by and eat with us later, don't you?
Well, first of all, two things. I've worked very, very many years on getting this Southern accent down just right for you, so hopefully you'll appreciate that. And the second thing, as all of our speakers are talking about our companies, I'm going to actually give you 3 money slides. So I'll tell you when they're there. So if you want to zone out for a little bit while I'm going through sort of the dynamics of our company, I'll give you a heads up when you get to the money slides. What you see there is a newly acquired facility that we purchased in Griffin, which is our home. We purchased this in January of this year. Our Georgia Economic Development person is out here in the audience, and she was very instrumental in that, and we certainly appreciate our association with the Georgia Department. I brought this in to show you this for two reasons. First of all, the negative part of it. This facility was built back in the 90s. It housed a company that made under-harness assemblies for vehicles. They were located in Griffin, employed about 1,250 people. They have subsequently moved to Mexico and Honduras and left the building. The reason primarily is because of our cost of labor in the United States, our benefit cost, and our tax structure. That's the bad news. The good news is we were able to acquire the facility. We're going to refurbish it and move our equipment and all of our warehousing and distribution into this facility, and we're expanding our productive capacity from currently, just to give you some rough numbers, about 650,000 pounds a month up to 850,000 pounds a month by this time next year. And in the footprint, we'll be able to more than double what we're currently doing today. I say that's the good news because our U.S. manufacturing base is doing very well in our global strategy, and I want to show you why I think those are very important to this group today. As Mitch mentioned, we are a textile manufacturing company. We actually own operations in the countries that you see there. We have 5 product categories. Towels, which you use every day, is our major product category. But in addition to that, we do bedding, which is primarily hospitality bedding. We also do apparel, which for us is institutional apparel, hospital patient gowns, scrubs, ER scrub information. We also do window drapes, and we do kitchen tier. We operate in these countries, and as many of our speakers have previously said, compliance is part of that. Today, our Griffin facility accounts for about 10% of our global production. It will go to about 15% of our global production. This just gives you a quick idea about the towel manufacturing supply chain. I won't stay in here long except to talk about the first slide, cotton farming in the United States. One of the advantages we have in our particular category is that cotton in the United States, we are the second largest producer of fiber in the world. We grow some of the best fiber in the world. We grow some long staple fiber and makes that very, very beneficial to us. So I won't stay there, but here's the first money slide. And I was going to tell you when you got there, so perk up, let's take a look at it. Why are we able to still manufacture in the United States and export from the United States when most all of our competition now is outside the United States and almost the entire domestic industry doesn't even exist anymore? And if you look at the proposition, what you'll find is that, like in many businesses, you've got a good, better, best quality, and you've got production cost. We have many fine competitors throughout the world. They are very, very well financed. They have the latest in technology. They have the latest in technical skills. They have a supply chain that is world class. They have everything we have. So how can we be competitive out of the United States when no one else has found that to be the case? And that's because we've moved to the upper end spectrum of the chart. We've moved to where we've optimized the best category at the highest end pricing. In other words, one of the strategies that we use, and I would contend that this is the case for a lot of the manufacturing, is high-end quality platform is where the goods are. In our industry, there's a lot of commodity product. Go into any store and you'll see it. That commodity product at the low end is very minimal. Most of it's what we call the big middle. There's a lot of product out there that fits into a pricing category that you would find in what we call the big middle. In our U.S. manufacturing, we're focusing on the upper end specialty products, and also for our U.S. customers, we're balancing our commodities too. So again, as a strategy for competing globally, because this industry, like most industries, you've already heard, is a globalization is going on. The strategy is we've got to compete at the very, very upper end. So that's money slide number one. Here's money slide number two. Why? What are the factors that cost more to do business in the USA as compared to other parts of the world? And this is comparing us to us. As you heard before, we manufacture in Pakistan, we manufacture in Bangladesh, we manufacture in China. We're comparing our own facilities in those countries to ourselves. And this slide will give you some idea, again, of what the differences is in cost competitiveness in those countries in our product. The largest part of our product most often is the cotton component. Cotton is a global commodity. There are some variations around the world where those prices are, but fortunately in the USA, we're fairly on the low end of that spectrum. And in yarn manufacturing particularly, we're on the low end of the spectrum because the energy cost in the southeastern United States compete very well globally with energy cost around the world. But again, it gets back to where are our disadvantages in the U.S. to compete globally? Labor, benefits, taxes, offset in this particular slide by duty, freight, some other factors, but you can see what we have to overcome there. This is money slide number three. Why are things changing in the United States to enable us to be more competitive with the rest of the world? And what you'll see is, in the first section, and I'm particularly looking here at China, Pakistan, and India, which are the major domestic or the major textile producing countries in the world, along with the U.S. By the way, I should have mentioned the U.S. is the third largest exporter of fiber and textiles in the world, which you might find fairly interesting now. But overseas labor rates are rising. This is true particularly in China, in India. There's a rising middle class in those countries. And as that middle class comes more on stream, they want more churches or Texas chicken. They want more apparel goods. They want more cars. They want more other things. And they certainly are competitive and have to be competitive in their country, and labor rates and those rise. The second thing, you can sort of look across there and see subsidies that these industries, particularly in China, have been subsidized for quite a period of time. China's economy is at the point now where they're not doing that. They're making some changes in their policies, changing currency rates. Countries have quite often kept their currency rate weak against the dollar, just so they could export more goods. That is rapidly changing as those countries grow and come on. Energy rates, I touched on that a little bit before. In the energy, we are very fortunate in the Southeast United States. We have world-class energy rates here. So there are some true key economic and demographic cost drivers that are changing right now that make the U.S. manufacturing much more competitive globally. As I mentioned earlier, we do manufacture around the world, and we do do a lot of work in the hospitality industry. The hospitality industry is global. Most of your major hotel chains now are in global markets around the world. A lot of those chains, they want upper-end best products. We're supplying that need from the U.S. as well as of our other mills. Most of the retailers we sell to, and we sell to some very fine retailers, and we have some great partnerships, but they're global too. They've globalized their businesses. So when you think locally, and we do that because jobs are important in Georgia, jobs are important in Griffin, jobs are important in your communities, and we take very seriously our responsibility to provide jobs in our community. But when you think locally, and a lot of us do, one of the problems we have in the USA, we think a lot about the USA and we're not thinking a lot about global business. All of our competitors are thinking globally. So if you go away with one thing today, think this. You can be competitive out of the U.S. You have to pick your markets wisely to do it. We do have some advantages, and the cost gaps are narrowing. The cost gaps are truly narrowing as we move forward. But you've got to think globally and adapt to the global landscape. If you do not, it'll be like the rest of the textile business that was here in Georgia, and as you know, it employed hundreds of thousands of people. It will not be here. So those were the money slides. I got a few other ones because I got a few minutes to go through. But one of the things that we talk about is the total cost of ownership. This is a concept that we work with our customers on, is about supply chain, which is very important to you in this room. Total cost of ownership. When you look at the product, and we have a towel from India and a towel from the US and a towel from China sitting on the table, and you compare the price of the towel, you could see some differences there. But when you talk about total cost of ownership, now you're getting into the supply chain. How do you get transportation cost or inventory cost, or how do you get point of sales data that you can be very competitive on there? So you have to talk to customers about a little bit more than apples to apples product. You've got to talk about what's in it for them in their total cost of ownership when they go back to their CFO and their accounting department, and they now all of a sudden, and I think Gary mentioned this, they're bringing in not only the product cost, but the compliance cost and the freight cost and the inventory cost and the accounts receivable cost, and we very strongly preach about total cost of ownership. Local manufacturing benefits for us, we can see small runs and all of that. I'll go through this, but talk a little bit about Made in America. You hear an awful lot about Made in America. I give ABC a lot of credit. Every week they run a Made in America segment. They've really been working on that. I certainly give one of our major customers, Walmart, very much credit for their initiative on bringing jobs back to the U.S. and their $50 billion commitment to buying U.S. Made in America, what we found, quite honestly, with you in this group, because y'all are pretty business savvy, everybody would like to have Made in America, not only in the United States, but in a lot of other countries around the world, but nobody wants to pay for it. I mean, that's basically where it is. So the attribute of Made in America is a great attribute, but it also has to hinge on a value proposition. You cannot rely solely on a product being made in America to get you placement either in the United States, the UK, the UAE, Australia, Japan, or any of those countries that we sell to. You have to have a value proposition that goes along with that. That's very important. Now for us, because we've just gone through this, and acquiring a facility, we've worked very closely with our state, federal, and local governments, and I will give a huge shout out to the Georgia Department of Economic Development, our local development authority, and our local city for making our expansion. They are true partners in our expansion process, and I want to leave you with a very positive note. This can be done by adapting to global economic drivers. It can be done by being in partnership with the folks that can help you. It can be done by partnerships with the supply chain and your customers. And I just appreciate you listening to me today, and hopefully we drove a few points across. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Doug. I was busily taking notes, didn't realize we were running out of time. I think there was some great wisdom there and some really original thinking on dispelling the myth that we cannot be competitive manufacturing, including with exports. Our final speaker this morning is Gianluca Fedelini. He is the Director of Global Sourcing at KaMin LLC, where he's responsible for a global logistics budget of over $200 million, covering both domestic and international freight moves. He describes KaMin LLC as a new company with a 70-year tradition of exploring, mining, processing clay. And I saw this and I stopped and I said, a new company with a 70-year tradition. Well, there is an explanation. He notes that KaMin was originally part of the J.M. Huber Corporation, but now is part of the Inman Partners portfolio, which includes myriad specialty minerals and chemical businesses. Today, he's going to discuss with us what he describes as KaMin's logistics footprint. Gianluca?
All right, thank you, Mitch. Okay, I got to get this one down, so escape. This is the new version of PowerPoint that I don't know how to use, but here we go. Slideshow. Where do I go from here? Play?
I think slideshow from present slide. Is that the first slide?
Yeah.
Click that.
There we go. All right, perfect. Yeah, I'm still on the old version of Windows, so I don't know how to use that one. But okay, thank you for the introduction, and appreciate also the opportunity to speak before you today. I always like to draw a kind of correlation with my fellow panelists, and starting with Stephen, you make me a bit hungry. Gary, I think we probably use some of your pumps, because when you ask the question if anybody in here mines minerals and pumps slurry, yes, in fact we do. And at the end, Doug, yep, got that right. Congratulations on shipping from the U.S. textiles, because many years back when I was working for the container lines, as I'd mentioned to you earlier, one of the main commodities that we shipped out was used textile machinery, which was essentially your industry that we were shipping out of the U.S. to India and Pakistan. So hats off to you for keeping it in the U.S. and doing a great job. Okay, so today, just kind of the highlights, as Mitch had mentioned, what I'm going to try and do is just really explain to you a little bit about what is kaolin clay and what is our logistics footprint. And it's quite a big thing, so I'd rather give you kind of a 40,000 foot view than just kind of give you the detail of one specific area. So actually, before I jump into what is kaolin clay, let me back up just a second and explain to you what is, or who is KaMin, and answer the question of a new company with a 70-year tradition, because I guess I have to explain that. But so originally, what is now KaMin was J.M. Huber, and J.M. Huber, I think their tagline is a family of chemicals, or I mean, they still exist today in Atlanta, exporting and selling a lot of chemicals and minerals. But in 2008, Iman Partners, which is a private equity group, purchased the clay division of J.M. Huber, and it became KaMin. In addition, in 2012, we, KaMin, purchased our competitor in Brazil, which is KaDam, and that's actually a mining facility in northern Brazil, essentially in the rainforest. We load ships on the Amazon River. So collectively, we're KaMin and KaDam, so we operate out of the U.S. and Georgia, from Rennes, Sandersville, and Macon, in addition to Monguba, Brazil. And I'm pretty sure, has anybody here heard of Monguba, Brazil? Okay. So that's something new that you've learned, but that's where we operate from. So from that, we'll jump into what is kaolin clay. So there's the D word, and there's certain people that I don't see in this room, so I think I might be able to say it, but it's not dirt. I've referred to it as that intercompany, and let's just say I'll try not to do it again. But the chemical makeup is here. I never really did quite so well in chemistry, so you can make that out for yourself. But it's kaolinite, commonly known as kaolin clay and China clay. And how it developed actually is quite interesting. And Curtis Volz mentioned in his presentation, you can't move Atlanta, meaning you can't bring Atlanta to the water. But in fact, billions of years ago, you can bring the water to Atlanta. And I say that because through Georgia, there's a fall line, and it runs right through the center of Georgia. And so, I mean, really billions of years ago, the water from the Atlantic came straight to central Georgia, and I guess it hung out there for quite many years. And when it receded, it weathered feldspar, which is a mineral, and that in itself created kaolin. So X number of years ago, 180 miles inland, and to this day we still find shark's teeth and bones and sand dollars in Macon and Rennes and Sandersville. And having spent a lot of time actually in Charleston before Macon, I knew nothing of that, and that's just downright fascinating to think that we had fish swimming around that far away from inland. So that's how clay was developed. Okay, so what is kaolin clay as we know it? When I started working for KaMin, I mean, I'm right here on the right side. You know, French Open, red dirt, stains, hard to dig, difficult when wet. And technically, I guess if you want to get scientific about it, over here is still clay, but it includes a large amount of iron, which gives it that red tint. But the clay that we process and mine and sell is really white, and it's obviously on the left-hand side of this slide. So that's what we refer to as kaolinite. So what is it used for? Here I have National Geographic. I mean, the largest portion of our business is to the paper industry, and it's used as a filler or a coating clay. And so when I say coating clay in the National Geographic, and also Mitch, and I think maybe DC Velocity.
Without a question.
Right, there you go. So when you have like fancy kind of magazines or brochures that have the high gloss, that's kaolin. When you take just maybe like a regular magazine, like, I don't know, Newsweek or Time, that's usually ground calcium carbonate. So our particular business doesn't cater necessarily to the filler side of the paper industry as much as we do to the coating. So in your National Geographics and your brochures and your DC Velocities, that's going to be kaolin that's actually giving that coating and is giving it a high gloss. So that's the big part of our business. Then we have what we refer to as the non-paper side of our business, or the industrial. And I mean, you just have a myriad of different applications: tires, cosmetics. For the ladies, you have your clay masks, paints, crayons. It's in glues, ceiling tiles. I think many of you have heard in the past KO pectate. Well, the KO pectate, that was kaolin that was in there, and it has a medicinal value to it for digestive purposes. They've since taken the kaolin out, the FDA, for some reason, but to this day, in gas stations locally, they still sell chunks of kaolin that people come in and eat. So, hats off to them. But I've never really, I've never really gone there. So. Okay, so how do we move it? So we really begin off with the mining, and it's not mining like you'd think in the coal, like underground, miles of tunnels and this and that. So it's really open pit mining. We remove about 100 or so feet of overburden, and the overburden is really the terrain that covers the kaolin clay. So we use excavators and bulldozers to kind of get that out of the way. And then using our large off-road, mining vehicles, we bring that to our blungers, we make it down with water, and then we ship it to the plant through a series of pipes to begin the beneficiation process. After we do all of that and are ready to ship it to the customer, we ship it out either in wet or dry form. Wet, it goes by tanker vessel, tank car, rail domestically, or tank truck. And then dry, we have containers, bulk or break bulk, truck, LTL, rail, and obviously a little bit of air freight, but we try and stay away from that. So this is what I kind of refer to as the opportunity session of the presentation, because really that's what this is about, kind of networking and providing opportunities for each other. So, I mean, if there are vendors and companies out there that would like to do business with KaMin, obviously these would be some opportunities. So between KaMin and Kadam, we ship 450,000 metric tons per year of dry bulk. So on any given year, about 13 to 15 vessels we charter completely, and we ship overseas from the U.S. and Brazil, predominantly to Europe and Asia. And that's a big business in Georgia. I think, in Savannah ports, there's the silos that sit on the river. Those are filled with kaolin at colonial terminals. Then another part of the business, which is almost quite as large as the dry bulk, is the container side. So 26,000 TEUs, which essentially just means 26,000 20-foot containers or 13,000 40-foot containers, we ship a year. So that's really big business. I mean, that's a lot of containers. Just kind of mathematically, I wanted to put some kind of fun figures at that. In end to end, that's about 100 miles of containers if you put them together. So that's a significant volume and refers back to our footprint that we do through Georgia. As far as our global reach, we export, whether by container bulk or break bulk, to 130 ports worldwide. We maintain rates in the supply chain to those areas, which I think covers about 55 different countries from Savannah, Georgia. So that's a significant reach for just a small outfit in central Georgia, and one I think everybody really needs to be proud of. So here are some facts and figures on the domestic side, referencing the truck. So domestically, we do about, you see on the interstate, these they call them vans, but I mean, people don't really think of a van, a 53-foot trailer. So we load about 5,000 53-foot trailers per year from our facilities, which are located in Macon, Sandersville, in Rennes, Georgia. So that's a good bit of traffic we put on the interstate. Another one that's really quite significant is the export trucks that we put on the road to Savannah Port travel about 3,091,000 miles per year. And this was really the first time I did this kind of math, and I had to go back and check to make sure it was right. But as far as I know, it comes out right. 3 million miles turns out, so around the world is 24,000 miles. So that's 128 trips around the world that our drivers do collectively, basis the miles that we run from Macon, Rennes, and Sandersville just to the Georgia ports. That's huge. And that's equivalent to 6.5 trips to the moon and back, which now I know is about 400,000 miles. Burning about 500,000 gallons of fuel per year. So, I'm not going to stay here and say that we're green. Obviously, we try to, but when I put that on the slide, that's not going to help. So then, obviously, we do a little bit of rail. We load and ship about 1,500 bulk hoppers per year to Savannah that we load in the silos, and this is ultimately what loads in the bulk vessels. So our good friends at Sandersville Railroad and the Norfolk Southern is who we use there. And then we also own, lease, manage, and maintain. Maintain is the big part, and that's where the big money is. 600 tank cars. And originally it had been about 1,200 tank cars, but the business has really been consolidating. Collectively in the U.S. and Mexico, these tank cars travel about 3.5 million miles per year. So some more facts and figures on other modes of transportation. We have air freight. Usually when we're doing air freight with, a heavy, cheap material, somebody's in trouble, whether it's us or the customer. It's very expensive to put, a couple metric tons or a container load, not in the container, but a container load of product on a plane to ship to the customer. So we try not to do that too much. And then LTL, we do a good bit of LTL cargo as well out of all of our facilities. Facts and figures on land. And this picture here, believe it or not, and it looks like a paradise, but this is from Central Georgia, one of our properties. So we own and lease 25,000 acres of land, and because the product is white, it gives off that reflection, and it's actually that reflection which makes the water look blue. It's not the water itself being clear. So if you don't have the money to go on some kind of fancy vacation to Jamaica or any of those other places, you just come and get my business card, and for a cheap sum, I'll get you some time at one of these facilities. So.
Some private islands up there.
Yeah, private islands. A couple $100, we could do some kind of rental agreement. So in conclusion, really, KaMin is a small company. We have about 350 people here in the U.S. and about another 150 or so in Brazil. But specifically in Georgia, we're a small company, but we really have a big logistics footprint. And that's about it. My goal was to just kind of spread a little bit about, what is Kaolin and KaMin. So, thanks.
Thank you very much. A couple of things I made note of. We'll go to the Q&A, so please get your questions ready. We've had the doors secured. We're not going to let anyone leave till there are at least 4 questions. I have probably covered or participated in more panels than I'd like to recall of the past 25 or 30 years. I have to admit, I've never seen an opening slide that tied together in a supply chain or logistics presentation, chemistry, physics, and geology. And for those like me who are always thinking, well, what is that one key takeaway? Just for me, very personally, I'm going to go back and ask how many members of my staff know that there is clay on the cover of our magazines. So with that, and thanking all speakers for some very good presentations, who would like to start? Please, microphone right here at the aisle. Or, I'm sorry, you'll bring the microphone too. I was.
Questions for all of you. Essentially, you've mentioned where your presence is currently. and maybe some places you're going to in the next couple years. What are some of the optimal markets in each respective industry that you're in that you're going to be looking to, that you'd like to get into maybe 5, 10, whatever, 15 years down the road?
Start at the end and come down?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that question. I think what you're finding, particularly in our markets, we're one of the largest suppliers in healthcare and hospitality. And we're seeing the globalization of that in not only, all the hotel chains, as I mentioned earlier, are participating globally, emerging. South America, Latin America is certainly emerging. Healthcare industry, there's a lot of technical textiles that in the U.S. as well. I didn't mention things like antimicrobials, all of those things. So we're seeing a tremendous move towards the globalization, the consolidation of the customers, but the globalization of those customers, and the just new innovative products. In fact, in our facility, we have we'll be beginning a new center of excellence where we're bringing in the schools like Georgia Tech that will be helping us on the latest innovative products, and we think that's one place that we can certainly excel in the U.S. and our export market.
For churches globally, our product is a relatively economical protein, so we can open up in pretty much any country in the world. Should you have friends, relatives that might have an interest in becoming a franchisee, do check churches.com, go to international, and it'll list all the countries that we would be very much happy to talk to you about potentially being a franchisee at.
Yeah, okay, as far as where we would like to grow, I mean, right now, Asia's our big market, but it's not necessarily where we want to open up shop, which might be maybe a bit where how Stephen's process works, but it's really where are our customers, so where are the paper mills opening up? And in fact, usually it was kind of Europe and Scandinavia, but that's kind of shifting over to Asia. So, just by means of that, the majority of our new business is going to be in Asia and other developing countries.
I think for GIW Minerals, the expansion certainly is any place that anybody wants to mine anything. But I think the push for the next 4 or 5 years is going to see if we can erode into the dredge market. There's some opportunity for us there. It's a logistical nightmare because moving this stuff around the world and making it in Grovetown, Georgia, it gets expensive. But I think that's where the growth is going to be.
Thank you. Next, please raise your hand. Someone will kindly place them right here, just about the middle. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Is it on? Oh, yes, it's on. I'd like to direct this question to Gianluca, Fedelini, and KaMin, and then maybe get an answer from everyone else. I think we all know, Gianluca, that you signed direct ocean carrier contracts, and I'm just curious, my question is, after you fill your MQC with the carriers, do you give some of that business to MBOs, or is it all moving on direct carrier contracts?
To be honest, we really maintain with our ocean carriers. There are some parts of business that we can go NVO. I mean, let's say it's a specific destination that our main carriers don't serve. I mean, we're not going to want to create a whole contract just for that. So some of that business can go NVO. But for the most part, when we fill an MQC, we stay with that carrier, especially if it's a year where they need business, because then, when it's a year where they don't need business and they want to get us off the ship, we remind them that obviously, we were there to help fill the ship when they needed clay. So, good question, Wanda.
I have another question for you. I really need to go on vacation.
Yeah. Me too.
Right about here.
This question is for Gary. I'm not very I'm very technologically challenged, but I'm wondering if with your pumps, I know it's all liquid, but are you looking at going into natural gas or liquid natural gas?
The KSB family has natural gas products. At GIW Minerals, we clearly do not. It's just not something we've ever gotten involved with, but that's why parent companies buy smaller companies, so they can have, bigger reach. But certainly there's some opportunity for the KSP family companies to get involved in that, sure.
Good afternoon, good morning. Gary, this question's for you. We're a third-party warehousing and distribution facility, and many of our clients import, but now there's a greater demand for us to now export that product to Canada and the UK. We're receiving more requests to assist with that classification, the tariff codes and things like that. I don't think we've been real comfortable with it, and now after hearing what you said, I'm really not comfortable with that. How can we best help the customer or our client get to the right resources so they actually can make those decisions themselves? Because when I look across our client base, I don't know that any of them have an export manager.
That's a good question. The good news for you is it's not your responsibility. If you want to have a good customer relationship, I encourage you to get them to the right government agencies. It's all public information. I learned how to do it because I worked at a great mentoring company that needed somebody like me to do it. But if a lot of companies believe it's the freight forwarder or their broker's responsibility, and that's clearly not true. I'll give you an example. My broker at the Canadian border sent me a report on Tuesday, and there were 25 entries on that report that had the wrong tariff code number on them. So I said, where did you get the tariff code number from? And they said, well, somebody in the office, it wasn't on the information, so somebody in the office just picked it. And what happens generally is they'll pick a number that they see you use all the time. The description was fastener kits, and the tariff code number was for pump parts. So it's their responsibility. There's all kinds of information out on the internet, the Commerce Department, Customs website, Bureau of Industry and Security website. They just don't know. They need to find out. And as part of the state of Georgia and being a company in Georgia, I'll help anybody because I believe it's my responsibility to teach people as exporters what the real responsibility to them happens to be. We're about keeping people in business, and people in business keep people employed. And with the breadth and the successes in the state of Georgia, you just need to be helpful.
Gary, this question is for you, and it relates to tariffs, but I'd like to echo what you just said. We have a client that had that same issue with Canada, and then what happens after that is they go back 3 years, and they start looking at all those codes. So it gets really messy really quick. So, but with the tariff clawback, is that if goods come into the U.S. and they're shipped out and they're not manufactured, or if it's raw material that comes in and it's placed on a final product and then it's shipped out, or that may be too detailed for this session? But
no, basically duty drawback, if a product was imported into the U.S. and duty was paid on that import, you take that product and put it into your product, or you take that product as it is and export that product. As the exporter of record, you're entitled to get the duty drawback. Plain and simple. Now, you might need to have the importer's information. You might need to work with them. When I worked for Club Car, I had a guy in New Jersey who exported every golf car, ATC little vehicle to Bermuda, and he told me that unless I gave him all the money that I got back from my export, he wouldn't help me. So he got nothing and we got nothing. But clearly it's a joint venture, if you will, between the two importing and the exporting companies. And if it's a big importer of record, Kawasaki, motor producers, Beldor, those folks that make motors around the world, when you put their product in your product and sell it, you have the right to that money. You need their import records, and that's why you have a service provider, because that information is confidential. They don't really want you to know what they spent on the product, because they're going to declare duty on their import record. But clearly it's a joint venture, and if people don't understand that there's millions of dollars left in the government, the Treasury Department, that's buying $200 toilet seats and $700 hammers. And you guys, if you're exporting, you're entitled to get the money back.
Just one comment, we'll go to the next question on duty drawback. It was relates to DC Velocity. Each year we track readership of various stories. We did a story on our import-export international logistics coverage last year, and it was the third most read story in the magazine over the entire year. And the consensus seems to be there is some money to be found there. I'm sorry. Right here? I'm sorry, hand up again.
Okay, excuse me. Hello,
I'm sorry.
my name is Frederick Bale. I'm with R.R. Donnelly. This question is for KaMin. With a lot of the information going to the internet and not magazines and printed books, are you finding an increase or a decrease in some of your customers' requests for the kaolin clay?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it kind of reminds me that I left that part out of the presentation, but the digital media is just, I mean, it's a massive threat to kaolin clay. So, for instance, you know, if you're going to read National Geographic, or if you're going to, you know, buy a new car and you want to show your wife or your husband what the car looks like, I mean, are you really going to go to the dealership and get a brochure and bring it home and show it to them? Or are you going to say, hey, look at this on your iPad? And it's really the latter. So that's a really significant threat to the industry. It's been consolidating, and it's why we really kind of push the non-paper business and try and develop new products, because the paper industry has, yeah, it's had its heyday, I guess you can say. Good question.
I've just collected, there is no clay in the iPad.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
Yeah. We've reached our quota, but we do have time for one more.
Hey, good morning. This is Vic Alvarez with Vector Global Logistics, and thank you very much for your participating in this panel. It's been certainly very interesting. There's a question for all of you. If there were something that you could change from the export process, what would it be? Either regulation, logistics, market, that would allow you to export more?
You know, I'll start, and that's a very, very thoughtful question. What would we change? Actually, in our industry, I wouldn't change anything, because most of our competitors in the U.S. have, for one reason or the other, decided to either go out of business or move offshore. And we have been able to adapt to the landscape and are flourishing very well. So I actually wouldn't change anything. But I think, to give a better answer in general, it's, you know, we have to embrace the globalization. Sometimes in the U.S. we're a little lazy, thinking that we are the market to end all markets. That is not the case. You know, globally, we certainly have our place and our predominance in that place, but as years go by, there's more and more opportunities globally than there are even in North America. And I think, certainly, I think if I were to change anything, I believe it's our next generation of leaders and management folks need to just understand that better.
I'll begin with the answer. Good luck with that. If you're looking around the Mediterranean, as a lot of researchers do, they find from time to time these little shards of clay tablets that go back 2,000 years to when Phoenician merchants plied the Mediterranean. And on there are little customs documents. So good luck with trying to do away with custom documents.
Do we need to say any more?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I don't think I would really change that much. I mean, I think if you do your investigation and you have the right vendors and partners set up for export supply chain, I mean, I think it's relatively, you know, easy. And maybe that's because I'm far removed from the day-to-day, but I really wouldn't change a whole lot.
Anything to add, Gary?
Well, from a GIW logistics standpoint, I'm betting on the transporter beam. That's what I'd like to change the most. From a compliance standpoint, it's all about education. The smarter you are and the more educated you are about the process, the less threatening and the easier it is to carry it out. The worst thing is, I didn't know. That's the worst thing you can say.
Well, we need to close with that. I want to thank you for joining us, and I'd ask you to join me in thanking our speakers for some great and thought-provoking commentary.
That was a fascinating session. I really appreciate it. Let's give another round for Mitch and the panel.